welcome everyone. This is the Charting the LifeCourse Foundation webinar. So a little bit about myself. I'm the mom of three. I'm also Ben's mom. And so if you guys have ever seen a LifeCourse presentation, you've probably heard stories about Ben. You will hear some stories about Ben today as well. I'll be using him throughout as kind of an example. I work at the University of Missouri, Kansas City Institute for Human Development on the Charting the LifeCourse Nexus team. I work mostly in product development and training, and also supported decision-making, I'm sorry. So for today, what we would like to have happen is we want to introduce the guiding principles of the Charting the LifeCourse framework, and I'll be sharing some concrete examples using my son, Ben, with permission, as an example of how we use some of the framework thinking and tools. We will have question and answers at the end of the webinar. You can use the chat feature or the question and answer feature to ask your questions. And we have staff on as well that if you have questions that they can answer, they'll go ahead and answer that. Otherwise, I'll answer questions at the end. So first, I want to set the stage and tell you a little bit about how Charting the LifeCourse came to be and why it came to be. So we know that people need services and supports for a good life, especially if they have, either a developmental disability, maybe they're aging, they have a mental health issue. For any number of reasons, any of us, all of us at some point in our lives need some type of support. So if you look at the figure in front of you on the far left and the small circle on the far left, you see a image that represents that all of us, every one of us exists in the context of a family and a community. And we'll talk more about family in some of the upcoming slides, but that's all of us. Now in the middle, when you're a person who either has a developmental disability, maybe you're someone who's aging or has a mental health issue, you may receive some type of paid services. Traditionally, those paid services are wrapped around a person so tightly sometimes that it can cut you off from your family and community. What we would like everyone to get to is the big circles on the right. So on the right, you see that we have the person, again, in the context of family and community, but you see stars all around, whether it's just the person, maybe they're with their family, they're out in the community, and those stars represent lots of different kinds of supports, which we will get into later in the webinar. So what we want to get to is that everyone can access those type of supports, whether or not you receive paid services or not. And we know that we need to change the way that we do things. And so the way that in the past things have changed is what we call transitional change. We might change the names of things, we might retool the system, we might merge and consolidate and reorganize. Probably many of you that are on have either been called a service coordinator, a support coordinator, a case manager, or you've had one of those type of titles. And sometimes when we get a new program, we change the names of things like the person providing the support. But what happens is usually when that happens, when we change the names of things, it's based on a program with funding. When the funding goes away or the program goes away or the program changes, the change that happened goes away with it. And so what we want to do is have transformational change where we change the way we think. We want to change the way we have relationships, the way we have power with people rather than power over people, the way our beliefs and our culture. We don't want to just have our regular assumptions. We want to disrupt those assumptions and rituals and structures. In other words, not doing things the way we've always done them, because you know what happens then, you get the same thing you've always gotten. And so Charting the LifeCourse came along, and Charting the LifeCourse is a person-centered framework. It's a person and family-centered framework, really. And it enhances the way we explore, plan, and problem solve. It's also a set of icons and language. And so across different systems and across different ways of interacting with people, organizations, systems, people that we plan with, people that we interact with, if we have the same language, right? If we all speak the same language, and I don't mean language, whether it's English, Spanish, whatever, but we're talking about the same types of things. We're using the same types of words. And we have icons that people are familiar with. And as we go through this presentation today, you'll see that the icons, you'll see the icons that we would like to become universal throughout whatever system or organization you might be involved with or interacting with. And it's also a set of tools and strategies. So implementing the framework itself, the thinking into practice. The framework was created for people and families of all abilities and all ages. So whether you're a person with IDD, whether you're a person who's aging, whether you're a person who just wants to use LifeCourse in your own life, it's there for you to explore life possibilities, to think about and share your ideas, your fears, and your hopes of what you would like to have happen in your life, to set high expectations, and to have conversations. And I put difficult in there as well, because sometimes LifeCourse can be really helpful for having difficult conversations that people have either avoided or just are not comfortable having. And so just talking to people and having different kinds of conversations with people. It's to help people navigate the future, to figure out where they want to go and how they want to get there, to advocate for their vision, for what they want their life to be. As we mentioned earlier, it's for problem solving, planning, communicating, and for exploring a variety of different kinds of supports and different life options. The thinking that guides the framework comes from many, many different things. The LifeCourse theory, which has been around for probably 50 or more years in maternal and child health, social capital, self-determination, the socio-ecological model, all of those different things came into play as we were thinking about and creating LifeCourse. So let's get down to it. Let's talk about the guiding principles of the framework. It all starts with our core belief. And our core belief is that all people and their families have the right to live, love, work, play, learn, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. Now, you notice it doesn't say all people with disabilities or all people who are aging or all people who are whatever. All is all. And so we include all people in families, not creating silos. And our first principle is focusing on all people. Let's talk about what that means. So we want to focus on all people regardless of their age, their abilities, their role in their family, and we want to consider them in visioning our values, our policies, how we support people and families. And we want all families to have choices and be able to access the supports that we need. And again, we're talking about all families of all ages, all different abilities. So you see a couple of things on the screen in front of you. On your left, and we're going to talk just for a minute about developmental disabilities, just to illustrate a point here, and then we'll kind of generalize it. So we know that there are about 4.7 million people with developmental disabilities in the United States. And that's based on it's a prevalence rate of 1.58% of the population. And so if we think about that as our 100% of people with disabilities, of people with developmental disabilities, I'm sorry. Now, if you look at the figure on the right, and this is surprising to some people, we've split the triangle into two parts. And the 25% that you see in the green is the percentage of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families who receive paid services through the DD system. The other 75%, or 3 out of 4 people, are not receiving paid services. In some cases, the systems of support don't even know that those people exist. And sometimes those people don't know that the system exists, or they may choose not to approach the system, or they may not need services. So we know that only 1 out of 4 people with IDD receive actual paid services. Now, the problem with that is our systems of support, in this case, DD, when they're making decisions, when they're making policies, when they're talking about their different practices, traditionally, they've only thought about the 25% that they know about. And it's so important that they think about that other 75%, because we want everybody, we want the 100% to have good lives. And so we don't just want to think about the people who are known to the service system and receive some type of support. We want to think about that 100%. And we want to think about, number one, what if they come to the door tomorrow and need support? So they need to plan for them. But we also want to think about if they never receive paid supports, how are they having a good life? And how can we support them and help them support themselves to have good lives? Our second principle is called the person in the context of the family. And again, you see an icon that represents the person in context of family. And we know that all people, all of us, exist within the context of a family. Now, we may all define family differently. It may be a family that you're born into. It may be a family that you choose. It may be a family that, it may be people that you just feel like are your family, that have become like family to you. And so family is defined by the people in that family. If they consider themselves family, then they're family. We know that people within a family, any of the people within a family and the family as a whole, need different types of supports that will adjust and change as the roles and needs of each of the family members change. So as people grow up, move out, do different things happen in their lives, their support needs may change. And so we need that to be flexible. And it's not dependent on where a person lives. So really a family is we defined as anyone who loves you unconditionally. Now we're back to triangles again. So remember that 100% we were talking about of people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Now, if we divide that up even further, we've still got that 75%, or about 3.5 million people who are not known to services. We also know that about 12% of people, or about 672,000 people, are receiving services while still living at home with their family. And then we also know that about 11% have out-of-home services or out-of-home placement, so about 500,000 people. So when you think about it, at least 89% of people, or I'm sorry, 80, my triangles don't add up, but pretend it adds up. 89% of people with developmental disabilities still rely on their families for at least some type of support. And that's one reason why we have to always consider the person in the context of that family. We also know that throughout life, we all go through different life stages. And as families, we go through different parts of the life cycle. And so thinking about the family, and not everybody starts out like this, but some of us start out as a single adult, maybe a new couple. In my case, I was a new couple who already had a built-in child. And then we may become couples with children. At some point, we want to launch those children out into the world and help them have a life of their own. And then we think about the family later in life as we're aging, and the dynamics of the family may change a lot during that time. We also, along the top of this triangle, or set of two triangles, think about individual life stages. And so all the way from birth through early childhood, through the school years, through transitioning from school into adult life. A lot of years we spend in adulthood. So you see that represented by several different icons, because adulthood lasts a lot longer than all of those early birth through transition stages put together. And then as we age. And so those are all connected. So as each individual family member moves through their life stages and the family moves through their life cycle, it's all connected. So quick example. I have, as you saw 3 kids. And so Ben has a twin brother. And when Matt was still at home and living with us, he helped out with a lot of different things. He had a car. And so he made sure Ben got to different places after school and things like that. And then he graduated from high school and he moved away to college and was living, 50 miles away. And Ben was still living at home with us. It changed the dynamic of their relationship, of all of our relationships together, and it changed the dynamic of how Ben was supported. And so all of those things are interconnected. And the reason you see the triangles there is because, all of us start out as a young child. When we're first born, we need a lot of support from our family. Our family's doing everything for us. They make sure that we are protected and that we have food and shelter and that we're safe. And then as we go off to school, we have other people come into our lives, teachers and other friends. And then as we go off into our adult life, our family's still part of our life, but they're doing less and less for us. And so as an individual, then in that blue triangle, you start out not doing anything for yourself at birth. but then eventually you do more and more in your own life as you grow and develop and become an adult and you age. We also know that a family has a lifelong impact on a person. And again, that's not disability specific. That's all of us, right? The things we like, the things we don't like, the things that we're good at is often biologically determined by our family. Our environments that we grew up in can very much influence the rest of our life. We may want to live in the same type of environment that we grew up in, or we may want to try something entirely different and say, I grew up on a farm. That's not the life for me. I'm going to live in the city. Our social connections, our first social connections are usually connected to our family. And then eventually we form our own social connections, but we still have that connection to those family connections as well. Our policies of how we grew up, the house rules, our family culture, the expectations of different family members. And so throughout life, all of those things have an impact on us. Another thing we talk about is what we call the reciprocal roles of all family members. And so we divide reciprocal roles into two different things, caring for and caring about. And I'm going to use developmental disabilities again as an example, but it can apply to just about anything or anybody. And so, as a parent, I'm thinking about the future for my son, Ben, I always have to think about, if I'm not around and in the future, who's going to provide for his day-to-day needs? Who's going to make sure that he has all of the things that he needs materially and financially? Who's going to help connect him to different roles and relationships if I'm not around to help him do that? Who's going to help him advocate and support his life decisions? And so oftentimes we get fixated on focusing on those things and planning for those things and often do a pretty good job of it. But sometimes what we forget to think about is who's going to care about that person when we're not around, and who's going to care about them now besides us. Who do they share love and affection and trust with? Who do they spend time with and have memories together with? Who knows about them? Who knows about their interests, their tradition, their culture, their history? And so, not just when we're planning for the future, but throughout life, we should be thinking about who else can be in a person's life besides just the person who's providing the direct care and support for that person. And then you'll see that on the right, we show a couple of different tools that people can use. And I'm not going to go into detail on those, but you can check them out on your own later. One is really for helping map who the relationships are in a person's life. And then the one in the blue is more about not just who's in my life, but who do I support and who do I care about and who do I care for? Because even someone who receives care and support may provide care and support to other people as well. And we have to think about that. We also have to think about the siblings. Siblings are a very important part of anyone's life as they're growing up. But when you have a person with a disability and they have siblings, and as that person grows up and their sibling grows up, that sibling may take on different roles down the road. As their parents age, that sibling may become more involved in their sibling's life and helping provide some of the care or even the oversight for care. Or just being there to care about them when the parents are no longer around. And so at the same time, that sibling may have their own family. They may have a wife and children. And so they're caring for their own family, their wife and children. They may be caring for their aging parents, and they may also be providing some type of care for their sibling that has a disability. And so we call that the club sandwich generation, because they're right in the middle of a whole lot of things going on in their life and a whole lot of responsibilities. Siblings often have to juggle those multiple roles. And so how do we help siblings be involved at many different levels along the way so that they understand, some of the things going on in their siblings' life, so that once they are in that position, they know what they need to know, or they can say, I don't really want to be involved in direct care with them, but I just want to be part of their life. I want to love them and care about them. And I know their history, and that's my contribution. And that's okay too. But we have to help siblings know the things they don't know, right? We all don't know what we don't know. And so we have to help them so that they aren't just left suddenly holding the bag going, now what do I do? So what we want to have, as we've been talking about the person in the context of a family, we want the family and every member of the family to have a good life. And so we want the person that we're focused on to be self-determined, to be interdependent, to be productive and integrated and included in all facets of life. But we also know that the family needs to be supported in ways that maximizes their ability, their strengths, their capacity to nurture, love, and support all their individual family members to achieve their goals. And so we want to also think about all the different team members that might be in a person's life. And so you've got the person, and we want to support their self-determination and self-advocacy. We want to support the families across the lifespan in their different roles. But we also want to support person-centered planning and supporters of people. So whether it's direct support, whether it's the people who provide, case coordination and those type of things. So how can they all use Charting the LifeCourse in supporting that person to have a good life? So our third principle that we're going to talk about is the trajectory of life experiences across the lifespan. And again, you see the icon that represents that. There's a quote that I like. I hadn't used it for a while, and I really thought it was important to bring it back. The future is not something we enter. The future is something that we create. And creating that future requires us to make choices and decisions that begin with a dream. That's a quote from Leonard Sweet. And I think it's really important as we start to talk about this particular principle. So when we talk about trajectory and vision and life experiences, we start with, what is your vision? What is the vision for a good life? What are the things that you want in your life, the things that make it a good life? And what are the things that you don't want? And it's very important to think about both, whether you're planning for long-term, 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road, or this, what's happening this year or what's happening this week, or you may be planning around something very specific, like I'm buying a new house or I'm moving to a different city. You want to think about what are the things that you want, right? So if I'm moving to a different city, I might think about what kind of a neighborhood do I want to live in? What kind of a house do I want to buy? What do I want to be close to? Transportation, different amenities, those kinds of things. If I think about what I don't want, and that's just as important, right? And we'll see why that's important in a minute. We'll illustrate that a little bit more, but it's very important to think about what you don't want. So if I'm, again, moving to a different city or different state, what are the things I don't want? I don't want a neighborhood where it's really noisy. I don't want a neighborhood where there's high crime. I don't want a house that has a lot of stairs. I want everything on one level. So I want to think about whatever I'm thinking about, whether it's long-term, short-term, or issue specific, always think about what I want and what I don't want. So we're thinking about a trajectory for a good life. So we've got our vision, right? Most people, when you're talking very generally about a vision for a good life, they're going to talk about things like, I want my friends and family around me. I want to make sure I have enough money that I can do the things I want to do. I want to have a job that I really like and that I want to get up and go to every day. I want to, maybe I want to have a certain type of home life, a faith life. For me, I like to go on vacations. You might think about your health, choice, freedom, all the things that are important to you, things that people don't want. And sometimes you want to start with what you don't want. I know when Ben was little, I could have very easily told you all the things I didn't want for him, but I wasn't sure what was even possible or what I could even dream was possible for him. And so I would start with things like, I don't want him to be lonely or rejected, or I don't want him to be in an institution. I don't want him to be limited in his choices of what he wants and where he can go and what he can do. And sometimes when you start with those things, you can then flip the script and say, okay, well, if that's what you don't want, what's the opposite? What do you want? And what could be possible? And so we need to allow ourselves to dream, first of all, about what we want and to have that vision, no matter what it is. And nobody should tell us that's not realistic or that's not possible. If it's your vision, it's your vision, right? Don't let people tell you that you can't, right? But we also want to, I think, when we talk about those things we don't want, that often identifies our fears, and so it's important to get those out and to state those and to make those clear. And so when we think about what we want and what we don't want, we also start talking about a trajectory. And a trajectory is really just a word that means a path. It's the way that you go. And so if you think about throwing a dart, right? If you have a target, you have a bullseye, and it has that nice little thing in the middle that you want to aim at, and you're aiming at that and you throw your dart. Like me, you may not hit the middle, but you're going to get probably on the bullseye somewhere. You're going to get close, right? You're going to start heading that direction. If you don't have that bullseye and you just throw your dart, it could go anywhere. Or if your vision is not clear, maybe you're wearing a blindfold and your vision is just not clear and you throw the dart, you might hit things you don't want to hit. You might go places you don't want to go. And so by having that vision of what we want for a good life, or what we want for whatever it is we're envisioning, we know what we're aiming towards. We know we can aim our trajectory towards that. And the reason it's so important to have that vision of what you don't want, you want to recognize when your trajectory or your path starts going towards the things you don't want, so that you can course correct that. And so the vision is very, very important to our trajectory. So this is Ben. Ben's good life vision includes a lot of things. As you'll see here on the left, it included getting a tattoo, which he does have one and he wants more. A lot of other things are important to him as well. Some of the things that we talked about earlier about a lot of people say, the things that he really likes to do and the places that he likes to go and the food that he likes and the things he likes to do. And then some of the things that he doesn't want for himself and that we don't want for him, poor health, not having any money. He gets really mad if he forgets his wallet and doesn't have his money with him. Being isolated or segregated, having poor health, being treated differently. And so we know that as Ben's trajectory goes, we want it to go towards all those things in the purple that he wants, right? And we know if it starts moving towards those things that he doesn't want, that we can do things to get it back on track. And so that's why you see that arrow that kind of changes direction there in the red. We also talk about the trajectory across all the different life stages. So we talked about the life stages a little bit earlier. And so as we go through all those different life stages in our lives, in all of our lives, we transition from one thing to another, right? And if you have a disability, sometimes you have other transitions that are more systems related transitions, but even from going from, being in early childhood or being in preschool and going into regular school, that's a big change. Going from elementary school into middle school, another big change, because all of a sudden you're changing classes and you're growing and your hormones are going crazy and things are changing in your life in general. And then transitioning from school. And then what happens as we get older, if our parents get older, if they're still caring for us, what happens when they turn 65 and get Medicare and SS and Social Security? If our parents pass away, what happens as we get older and prepare for end of life? So we all go through all these different life transitions all throughout our life. We also think about life experiences. Life experiences are how we move our trajectory towards what we want, or sometimes towards what we don't want. And so we want to make sure that if we're a child, or if we have a child, we want to make sure that they have life experiences that are going to prepare them for school and for life after school, for their future, for employment. So for instance, if I want my child to grow up and have a job, then I'm going to have him have chores when he's young. He's going to learn at whatever level he can on doing different things around the house, taking out the trash, helping with the dishes, helping vacuum the floor, whatever that is in your house. Find some chores, having an allowance and learning how to spend money. Having all kinds of different things that people do as they grow up, going to birthday parties with friends, participating in some sort of a sport or an activity, learning to say no. I think it's always important for anybody to learn to say no. As frustrating as it is for our kids to tell us no, we have to teach them that it's okay to say no if something makes them uncomfortable or is hurting them. Because if we don't, they become more vulnerable as they become an adult, and especially if they have a disability. We have to teach them to be able to say, no, I don't want that, I don't like that, or you're hurting me, you need to stop. And so all of those life experiences help move our trajectory towards the things that we want, and try to keep us away from the things that we don't want. And we want to give people anticipatory guidance. Hey, this life stage is coming up. Have you thought about this? Have you tried this? What kind of experiences are you thinking about having to get you ready for that next phase of life? We also illustrate down here on the right our questions and life experiences booklet. And we also have quick guides that are available on our website that will help you with figuring out what are some of the things we need to think about or do at different stages of life that will help us move our trajectory the way we want it to go. And then our life experiences also equate to something called dignity of risk. Dignity of risk just means that you have the right to make mistakes, that you have the right to try things and do things and have life experiences. And sometimes you're going to fail. And we all need to learn how to fail and to do it gracefully and to learn from it. And so if we protect people so much that they can't do that, then it's going to make them more vulnerable in the future. And it can result in things like lowered expectation and dependency and low self-esteem and underachievement. And that's not what we want for anybody. And so people have to be able to try things and do things and sometimes mess up like we all do and not be held back for it the rest of their lives because they tried it once and failed at it. And so when we think about life experiences, the more we have life experiences, the more we can move towards our life outcomes and our good life. And so having that vision takes us towards having expectations and hopefully higher expectations and trying different things and having those life experiences and gaining even more opportunities. The more that we're out there doing things, we're going to find new opportunities and more possibilities and create new visions. And it just keeps going around and around as we grow and as we develop and as we learn new things and try new things. And so to wrap up the trajectory and life experiences, this is the tool that we call a trajectory. We have lots of different types of trajectories, but this is a basic life trajectory. It helps you think about what you want, what you don't want, and it helps you consider what you've done in the past that either worked or didn't work and what you want to do moving forward. What are the life experiences that are going to take you towards what you want? And so I'll just show you a couple of examples here. One is what we call a family perspective trajectory that we did for Ben. So it's not his words, it's our words of what we think he wants or what we want for him and our reflection on his past experiences. And then we also use the trajectory to help him hire staff in his self-directed supports program. Our fourth principle focuses on life domains. And the life domains help us refine our vision, they help us explore life possibilities, and they help us plan for the life outcomes that we want. So these are the life domains, and I'm just going to go through them really quickly. One way that I like to remember them is if you're going to a party or a conference or some type of place where you're going to meet a bunch of people that you don't know. Once you introduce yourself and tell people your name, what's the next thing that you talk about? Usually it's like, what do you do, right? And so daily life and employment is kind of the what we do. When we're kids and we're young, we go to school. As adults, hopefully we're employed or have some type of meaningful day experience that's like employment or leads to employment. Maybe it's volunteering, different types of things like that. So that's daily life and employment. The next thing we talk about is like, well, where are you from, right? And so or community living, it's not just where we're from, but, what kind of living situation we have, what are our living options? What kind of places are we close to public transportation? How do we get around our community? What are the things in our community that we can access? And so that's community living. And then we sometimes talk about, well, who are the people that we may have in common? Do you know so-and-so that has the same last name as you? Or, oh, you live so-and-so. Maybe your neighbors, we know some people in that area. Do you know them? And so we talk about who are our friends, our relationships, what we do for fun, our own personal networks, and sometimes even like our faith community, whether we go to church or temple or synagogue or whatever that may be. And so that is social and spirituality. And then sometimes we talk to people about our health, right? Oh, my knees, I had to have a knee replacement, whatever. But healthy living is not just health in general, but, it can be behavioral health, our nutrition, our wellness, affordable care, all those different things around health that we think about. And then safety and security. How do we prepare for emergencies? How are we making sure that our well-being and our rights and our issues are being protected? For people with disabilities or people who are aging or people who have mental health issues, sometimes we have to think about whether they have guardianship and what are the options and alternatives around that, such as supported decision-making. And then finally, advocacy engagement. What are our roles? What are the things that how do we interact with our community? Do we have responsibility in our families and our communities? Do we take leadership roles? And so those are our connected life domains. Because if you think about it, you really can't think about one life domain without thinking about how other life domains impact it or how it impacts other life domains. So if we're employed, our health can affect that. Where we live can affect that. Are we close to transportation to get to work? How do we get there? Is it a long commute? Is it a short commute? Do we have time in our life after work for our social and spiritual life? Are we safe in going to work? Is it in a safe neighborhood? How do we stay safe? So all of those things are constantly interacting with each other in our lives. And that's any of our lives. So the life domains, I think one of the main things they can do and do really well is to help us to narrow down and to really pinpoint and to really understand that vision that we have for a good life. And again, that can be for long term, that can be short term, that can be for specific issues. But as we're thinking about our lives and planning for life, you can go through each of those different life domains and get even more specific about your vision. What kind of a job do I want to have? Where do I want to live? Who do I want to live with? How do I want to stay healthy? What are the things that are important to me about my health? As I'm transitioning from being a child into being an adult, how do I start to take control of my own health and the things that impact it? And so forth. So you can go through any of those life domains to help you get more specific about the vision itself. We also want to think about what are the life possibilities across the different domains. So what I do during the day, how I'm supported, how I connect with family and friends and faith and fun, where I live, how do I stay healthy and safe? How do I advocate and interact with, different types of roles that I might want to be involved with? And so when you see this diagram here on the left, this chart, we have innovative at the top all the way down to traditional options. And so when we think about how people are supported, where they live, what they do, when you look at traditional, they're on the bottom, there are services that have existed for a long time. And some of those things that have existed for a long time, some people still want those things, but other people are wanting to try different things. They have a different vision. And so we start to move up that ladder a little bit we're moving towards that innovative space. And then we get to the second level where we have things that are now newer things that are available in most places that are more inclusive and more community-based, less segregated. And then finally, we want to think about new and innovative things that haven't been thought of yet. And so, if traditional supports and services don't work for you, think about what would and try to create something new. And so we have that realm of life possibilities. And so we have a specific handout for people with developmental disabilities to think about, what are the life possibilities across those different areas and across all of the life domains. And so that's something, again, you can find on our website. We also want to make sure that we have balance in our life. And so oftentimes when people need different types of supports, whether it's because they have a disability, maybe it's because they're aging, we want to focus very heavily on health and safety, it's understandable. We want people to be healthy and safe. But what we don't want to do is focus so much on health and safety that we forget about the other aspects of their life. And so we want to find that balance between health and safety and all of the other life domains so that people can have that balance in their life and still live the lives that they want to live, even if they need some different supports for health and safety as well. So this is a tool that we created to help people really kind of dig into the different life domains. And so this one is a family perspective again. So this is my opinion and what I want and what I think Ben wants in his life and these different things. There's also one that's person-centered that a person can fill out in their own words as well. And so again, I'm a person that fills out things very thoroughly, and I just can't not write something down in every little space, but you can just take one or two of those spaces even and think about what is it that I want more specifically in this area and prioritize those. And again, this is just an example to share with you. So our fifth principle is the 3 buckets of support. So we've talked about what a good life is, how we envision it, how we have life experiences, all the different things that we just talked about, the person in the context of the family. So now we need to think about, how do we get to that good life that we've envisioned? How do we get on and stay on that trajectory that we want? So these next two principles really address that. So the three buckets is really just three different types of supports that we all need in our lives at some point or another. And so we have discovery and navigation, we have connecting and networking, we have goods and services. And I'm going to talk about each of those individually, just really briefly. So discovery and navigation means that sometimes we just need information, maybe education and training. We might need information. I know when Ben was young, we first discovered that he had different diagnoses and different delays. I always wanted more information. We didn't have the internet back then because he's 32. And so, I would go to the library, or I would read anything I could get my hands on about whatever it was that I wanted to know more about. Sometimes I just needed somebody to teach me some skills, right? And so that's part of discovery and navigation as well. And then learning how to navigate all of the different things that might be available and figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work. And again, that comes still under discovery and navigation. Connecting a network just means connecting with people who have been there and done that, right? Who understand, who have something in common. And so that's how we get emotional support. That's how that we realize that informational support, where we realize we're not alone, that there are other people out there that are experiencing something similar to us. And that's how we develop relationships and build social capital. It's also a great way to get information, because rather than just reading something or getting some type of training, we're talking to somebody who shares a similar experience, and they can share what they did and what their experiences are and what they tried and what worked for them and what didn't work for them. And so that's a different type of information that we can get. And then finally, goods and services. I like to call it the stuff, right? And so how do we support our day-to-day life? Whether it's physical support, whether it's financially, whether it's material and instrumental type of things that we need. And so if you think about your own life, right? If you're going to go buy a car, right? You might want to get information about different types of cars. So you might want to look at some of those reports that they put out that talks about which cars are the safest, or which ones are the best performing cars, or which ones are the most economical cars. So you're going to get all kinds of information. And then you're going to maybe connect with someone that knows about cars, right? Or someone maybe that's just bought a car, and you'll ask them about their experience and what they think is important and things you should look out for. And then finally, goods and services. You might need a loan to buy that car. You might need to, if it's a stick shift, you might need somebody to teach you how to drive a stick shift. You might need some sort of an adaptation to that car. So if your legs are short, you may need like a pedal thing to make your feet reach the brake and the gas pedal. So you can use, everybody uses the three buckets of support throughout their life without even thinking about it. And then principle number 6, and one of my favorites and one of the most important, I think, is the integrated supports. And so you see this star icon up there. So remember the stars from earlier. We talked about, a person with no paid formal supports. We talked about traditional formal supports. And then we talked about kind of what our vision is, that everybody has those stars throughout their life in different parts of their life, so that they get support when and where they need it, but not necessarily separating them from the things that are important to them. And so when we talk about the star, we talk about 5 different points of the star. And so a good way to remember is you have 5 fingers, right? And so always think about the 5 different fingers on your hand. So we have personal assets and strengths, we have relationships, we have technology, we have things in the community, and we have eligibility supports. Now, you notice I said eligibility supports last, and I did that on purpose, because traditionally, when we support people, whether it's people with disabilities, people who are aging, young children in early childhood programs, we often think first about what are they eligible for, right? What kind of supports can they get? Paid supports can they get? But sometimes we stop there. And so the star really encourages us to think about all different kinds of supports, and not just eligibility supports, and maybe even to think about that last. And not everybody's going to get eligibility supports, right? Remember the 75 and 25? That 75% may never have eligibility-based supports, but they can use all the other parts of the STAR. So let's dig into those just a little bit. So when we think about relationships, we divide that up into 3 different types of relationships. So obviously our family that we talked about earlier, people that love and care about us and that we're committed to each other. Our friends, people we enjoy spending time with, people that we have things in common with. And again, friends care about each other. But one of my favorite types of relationships is acquaintances. Acquaintances are people that we come into contact with, maybe frequently, but we really don't know them well. We might know their name, we might not, but we recognize them. We see them often in places that we go and things that we do. So quick example, my son, Ben, who has a developmental disability, he receives supports. And, one of the things that he likes to do is go to our local community center. And he has a person who comes in a few hours a day, and takes him out different places and helps him out in the community and helps him do things he wants to do. And we were between staff people at one point in time, and Ben had not gotten to go to the community center to work out or play basketball recently. And so I was off work and I said, hey, let's go to the community center. And you haven't been up there for a couple of weeks because you didn't have anybody to take you up there and hang out with you. And so we go in, and the minute we walked in, there was probably at least a half dozen people who said, Ben, where have you been? We've been worried about you. Have you been sick? Are you okay? And I realized really quickly, Ben didn't know most of their names. They knew who he was, but he didn't know who they were. He recognized them, but he didn't know their names. He's not, kind of like me, he's not good with names. But these are acquaintances of his because he sees them when he goes to the community center. Same thing when he goes to Walmart or he goes to the grocery store. People recognize him. They are used to seeing him there. And those acquaintances notice when he's not there. And they wonder what's going on and they worry about him. They care about him. And if somebody were mistreating him or being mean to him, I think there are people that those acquaintances would step in and say, hey, that's not how we treat people. And this has been, he's our friend. So those acquaintances can be very important. And acquaintances can also grow into those other relationships. They can become our friends. They can become like family to us. And so don't discount those type of relationships. Another area that we look at is personal assets and strengths. And really, we should always start there because, what is the person that we're thinking about good at? What are the things that they have in their life? What are the skills that they have? What are things that maybe they own or that they have access to? I always say I'm going to buy Ben a car. Now, Ben has cerebral palsy and he has intellectual disabilities. And part of his cerebral palsy is he has a head motion where he sways his head back over his shoulder where he's not looking ahead. So, driving for him might be a little bit difficult if he's going like this, right? And he doesn't read or write very well, so passing the driving test might be difficult. So I never say never, but the likelihood of Ben driving a car, at least at this point in time, is not huge. But if he had a car, that would be an asset of his that somebody could take him places that he needs to go, right? If he has a staff person that maybe doesn't have reliable transportation, if they can take public transportation to our house, then they can use that car to drive him to the places he wants to go. And so thinking about personal strengths and assets as we think about supporting a person is very, very important. Technology, we all use technology. So why in the world, how can we use it? Why wouldn't we use it to support people? Whether it's someone who has a disability, someone who's aging, as I age, I think about what are the things I can put into place in my house. And so for Ben, one of the things that we've put into place is cameras. So we have a doorbell camera on the front door, which lets us know on our phones if he's home alone. It lets us know if somebody's at the door. It also enables us to talk to them through that camera, and they don't know if we're inside the house or if we're 2,000 miles away, right? And so, one of the things we always worried about is what if Ben answered the door while we were gone, and it was somebody that, had bad intentions or that he shouldn't be answering the door for. And so that was something that helped us. We also have a camera on the back door in case somebody's in our backyard. We know that they're back there. You can have cameras in the house to where if we need to check in with Ben and we're gone, we can turn on the camera and talk to him. And so, even though he's still living at home, we're starting to do things that will help enable him to live out of our home with different types of supports that are technology based. And he'll be used to those things because we're already trying them at home. And then community supports. What are the things in the community, the places that we can go, the groups and membership organizations that we might be able to belong to? The government resources, things like public transportation, different programs that anybody as part of that community can access. So whether you have a disability or you're aging or whatever, anybody can access those services, and so can you, right? And so, Ben learned in school how to ride public transportation. We have a small bus that runs around to different places in our town. So he can go to Walmart, or he can go to the grocery store, or he can go to the fire station where he volunteers, and he can use public transportation to do that because it's a community resource that he has access to as part of the community. And then finally, eligibility supports. And so whatever system you might be dealing with, don't just stop there. So if you're thinking about disability services, that's great. Maybe you'll qualify for those, maybe you won't. But what other things can you qualify for? What other types of government supports or community supports that you might be eligible for different things? Things like food stamps, different types of supports like HUD housing, things that are based on your age or your geography or your income level or your employment status. And so different types of eligibility supports can all work together to provide even more support than just sticking with, oh, I'm in this system and this is the supports I'm going to look at. And so we call them integrated supports because we want them to work together, and we don't want people to just be reliant on one specific type of supports. And so you see your trajectory and your vision here. And so if you're only relying on eligibility supports to keep you on your trajectory to a good life, what happens if for some reason you don't get those? Maybe you have Medicaid, and for some reason you can't get Medicaid anymore. If that's the only thing that's helping you towards your good life, what's going to happen to your trajectory? Is it going to keep going if those supports go away towards what you want, or is it going to go towards things you don't want? And so we don't want to rely on just eligibility supports. We also don't just want to say, the family's doing a great job. We're just going to rely on the family to make sure everything happens. Families age. Families have health crises of their own. Sometimes families are just tired and they need some more support. So if you're just relying on those relationship supports or just on the family, and something happens with that family, those supports or that trajectory may start going to things that you don't want to have happen and not just the things that you want to have happen. So what we want to see is all of those different types of supports around the star, keeping us on our trajectory toward a good life and helping us keep from going towards the things that we don't want. And we want those things scattered throughout our life, where we need them, when we need them. Most people don't need constant support 24/7. I mean, yes, there are some people that do, but most of us just need support sometimes. So where do you need them? How do you need them? At what level do you need them? And how do you integrate all those different types of supports so that even if you do receive those paid eligibility supports, they can be enhanced and they can help enhance all the other types of supports that you might be able to access. So this is just an example. This was one I created for Ben during COVID, and it was really thinking about what happens if my husband or I gets COVID, gets sick, passes away, whatever may happen. And for whatever reason, if he has an alternate caregiver. And again, I created it for COVID, but it's just as applicable post-COVID. And so if we're not around to care for Ben, thinking about all of his assets and strengths, but also some of the family assets. What are some of the financial things we put into place? Other things like our house being paid off or Ben having a special needs trust. So listing those type of things, listing out people that know Ben or that can help with planning and problem solving, people that just know it, love and care about him. What are the eligibility supports he can access? Where are the places he likes to go in the community where he's known and that people know him? How does he use technology? And so that's just an example of how you can use the star in many different ways, but that's just one example. And finally, our seventh principle is transformational policy, systems, and community change. And we want that to be person and family-centered and driven. So we want to partner with people with disabilities in their families, or really any people, whether it's people who are aging, whether it's young children in their families, so that they can engage, lead, and drive policy and systems change. I guarantee you the legislators and the different politicians, they want to hear from the people that their policies and their decisions affect, not necessarily from the people in the systems that support those people. And so families have to be able to reach out and write letters and go to, coffee with their legislators, or, send them a letter or call them and tell them what they think of a bill that's going through the legislature. So how do we encourage people and support people to do that so that they can help be the change? And we want to make sure that those changes are going across all kinds of different systems and all the different ages. And so thinking about, educational systems and early childhood systems and things like voc rehab and things that happen after school, like employment, college, the military, all different types of services and supports, and retirement, aging, health. How do all of those things work together so that they're integrated and comprehensive and coordinated? And so I'm going to just recap in one slide here. We have the person in the context of their family and community. We've talked about the different life domains. We've also talked about the 3 buckets of support that we all use in our lives without even thinking about it. And we've talked about the star and how we can use the different parts of the star in our own lives and in the lives of people we might be supporting. And we've talked about the trajectory and having a vision and keeping that trajectory going towards what you want and not towards what you don't want. And then again, all the life stages as we experience them throughout life. So that's the foundation of Charting the Life Course. But before you leave, I want to tell you about a couple of other things. So we are now getting ready we are in high planning mode for our 7th annual Charting the Life Course showcase. And it will be May 2nd through 4th here in Kansas City. So if you haven't registered yet, registration is open. You can scan the QR code to register. Your registration includes several different meals, a reception, and just amazing learning and interacting with other people who know about Charting the Life Course and have been using it in different ways in their own lives, in their roles, and in their systems of support. So if you haven't thought about coming to the showcase, if you've been there before, come back. If you haven't been there, come and get some energy and get some more learning about LifeCourse and find out how people are using it, how it's impacting lives. And these are just a few pictures from past showcases. We always have a camera set up with lots of fun props. And so we learn a lot, but we also have a lot of fun. So consider coming to that.